Okay, so now let's talk about encryption. And we've seen encryption a little bit in this course, but now let's try to formalize what it means. So there are two types of encryptions happening within AWS. You have encryption at rest and encryption in transit. So data at rest means that the data is stored or archived on a physical device. So that could be a hard drive or like a hard disk. It could be an RDS instance because it's a database. It could be an S3, Glacier Deep Archive, or any kind of S3 buckets, actually, these kind of things, right? It's at rest because it's not moving, it's written somewhere. So, for example, we can have encrypted data at rest on an EFS network drive, or we can have encrypted data at rest on Amazon S3. But there's a second kind of encryption, which is in transit. In transit means that encryption while the data is being moved from one place to another. And so that means in motion. And so, for example, it says whenever you transfer data from your on-premises data centers to AWS, or when you move from between an EC2 instance and a DynamoDB table, for example, because it's writing data or retrieving data, or in this example up there from EFS to Amazon S3. So in transit means that the data is transferred on the network. And so there are two kinds of encryption. There's encryption at rest and encryption in transit. They use different techniques, okay? But ideally, because we want our data to be encrypted and protected all the time, we want to encrypt data in both states to protect it. For this, we leverage something called encryption keys. And I'm going to stop right there because you don't need to know how the encryption key works at the CCP level. But just so you know that using these encryption keys, we can encrypt the data. That means that someone who does not have access to these encryption keys, even if they had access to our data, they could not decrypt it and they could not read it, and therefore it's protected. So the encryption service at the center of AWS is called KMS, Key Management Service. So anytime you hear encryption for a service, it's most likely going to be KMS. And so with KMS, we don't have access to the keys. AWS will manage the keys for us, and we just define who can access these keys. So there is an opt-in for encryption. So for example, for your EBS volumes, you can choose to encrypt them with KMS. For your S3 buckets, you also have the option to do server-side encryption of objects. For Redshift databases, you can do the encryption of your database. For RDS, the same thing. For EFS, you can encrypt your files. And there's also some services that have encryption automatically happen no matter what. For example, CloudTrail logs, S3 Glacier, and Storage Gateway. The second service used to perform encryption is called CloudHSM. So with KMS, it is AWS who manages the software for encryption. But with CloudHSM, AWS will just provision to us the encryption hardware, but we are managing the keys ourselves. So a dedicated hardware for us is called an HSM module, so hardware security module, and it looks like this. And so with this aspect, AWS will give us the hardware in their infrastructure, but we manage our own encryption keys entirely, not AWS. And to make sure that no one can have our keys by sneaking into the data center of AWS, the HSM device is tamper resistant. I mean, if someone tries to tamper it, it will fail. And there is FIPS 142 level 3 compliance, which is a security standard. So Cloud HSM, how does that work? Well, AWS will manage the hardware, so they will manage the device I just showed you. But we use the Cloud HSM service with the Cloud HSM client to manage the keys. And obviously, the connection between our client and Cloud HSM is encrypted so that we can manage the keys securely. Okay, so what type of KMS keys do we have? We have the customer managed key. This is a key that is created, managed, and used by the customer, so you, and you can enable or disable a specific key. You can also define a key rotation policy. For example, you want a new key to be generated every year, while of course the old key is preserved. You can also have the possibility to bring your own key. Then you have the AWS managed keys. So this time it's created, managed, and used on the customer's behalf by AWS. So you're going to find it whenever an AWS service has some encryption managed by AWS, and the key name is AWS/S3 or AWS/EBS, and so on. So whenever you see AWS/, it's an AWS managed key. Then we have AWS own keys. So it's a collection of keys that a service owns and manages to use in multiple accounts. So AWS can use these keys to protect some resources in your account, but you actually don't have any power to view the keys. And finally, you have the Cloud HSM keys or custom key store, where the keys are generated from your own CloudHSM hardware device, and all the cryptographic operations will be performed within the CloudHSM cluster. So that's it for encryption. I hope you liked it, and I will see you in the next lecture.